Can you teach yourself the violin? Yes, you can. However, there are some very important things that you should know to ensure that you can achieve your long-term goals. Learning the violin is very difficult for everybody. There are some aspects of it that are truly frustrating and can drive you crazy. If you are not aware of these challenges ahead of time, you can quickly lose your drive to practice and you'll want to quit. I'm Joel Kennedy with Kennedy Violins. Now, I've taught hundreds of students over many years, and in that time, I have learned what's easiest and what's hardest about learning the violin. More importantly, I've learned that there's just a few things that if you can get those correct from the beginning, you greatly increase the chances that you're gonna love learning the violin and you're gonna be able to achieve all of your long-term goals. Today, I'm gonna list those things one by one so you can make sure that you achieve all your goals. Now, if you're trying to learn the violin without a teacher, there are 4 things that will probably trip you up. So if you know about these 4 challenges right from the beginning, then you can be paying attention to them and you greatly increases your chance of success. So let's go ahead and talk about those 4 challenges. Number 1, knowing how to practice. Knowing how to practice is very, very important. A lot of people think that how much you practice is the most important, but it's not. It's knowing how to practice. So how do you practice properly? So the first one is consistency. Consistency is key. Consistency is more important than how much you practice. So pick a time, 4 or 5 days a week, and you practice the same time that day, right? So that way your practicing becomes habit. It becomes something that you almost can't do. That way, because it's habitual, because it's consistent, you'll be surprised how fast you rack up good time practicing your instrument. The second part of successful practice is playing something correctly as many times as you can. I'll say that again. Practice is playing something correctly as many times as you can. So the speed at which you practice is not necessarily important. You just want to make sure you practice something correctly as many times as you can. The easiest way to do this is use the 3 times rule. Just play something correctly in a row, 1, 2, 3, without making any mistakes, and then you've probably learned the passage. Then speed up what you're practicing and then do it again, 3 times in a row. I promise if you practice this way, your practice sessions will be much more efficient. The third part of successful practice is using a metronome. This kind of goes along with the second thing that I mentioned. So when you're playing something correctly as many times as you can, you want to use a metronome because metronome will give you consistency, right? There's many kinds of metronomes that you can get. You can get these little pendulum types here. They're pretty inexpensive. They're very easy to use. Or you can use like one of these little digital things. They also act as tuners as well. You can use them to tune your instrument, but they make easy metronomes, and they're not terribly expensive. But I promise you, every great player that you know of, or every great player that you've seen, they practice with a metronome. Okay, the second challenge to learning the violin is proper left-hand technique. Now there's just a couple things, a couple errors that students, especially ones without teachers, almost always make. And this error prevents them from being successful and enjoying their practice because it holds them back almost immediately. Okay, so a couple things to notice with the left hand. Number 1 is you want to make sure that your wrist is never up or pushed out. Your wrist should basically be straight, okay? So if you were to drop your arm and raise it up, whatever natural position it likes to be in, that's pretty much what it can be when you're playing on the instrument. So you never want to have your wrist pointing out, and definitely never have your wrist touching the neck of the violin. That's the biggest error that I see constantly, and that'll prevent your left hand from working very well. Make sure that you never touch the neck of your violin with your palm. The second thing about good left-hand technique is you want to make sure that your thumb is always attached to your first finger. So wherever that first finger goes, your thumb goes. Wherever the thumb goes, your first finger goes. They're best buddies. So any time you're in first or second or third or fourth position, this thumb always moves with that first finger. The worst thing you can do is to move the thumb independently of that first finger. Keep them together. Okay, the last big trap that you want to make sure you don't fall into with your left hand is picking your fingers up when you put them down. Make sure you do not pick your fingers up when you put them down. Keep your fingers down. So as a general rule, you want to keep your fingers down unless you have to pick them up, right? If you're picking your fingers up, then what you're doing is you're creating a lot of inefficiency and you're working a lot harder. This will make it much harder for you to play quickly, and it'll make it much harder for you to play in tune. So especially with scales, make sure you keep your fingers down. Right? Pick them up when you got to go to the next string. When you got to the next string. Right? So always practice like that, especially with your scales, and then you will long-term be much more successful with your pitch and your speed. Okay, so the third trap that people fall into very easily because the proper technique is so counterintuitive is holding your bow properly, or just your right arm, right hand technique. Okay, so just a couple things to remember. Beginners almost always, especially when they don't have a teacher, play with a straight pinky. You want to avoid this. Now, I know when you're first playing the violin, it's very difficult to not do this because this feels a lot better. It feels a lot stronger. And when you bend your pinky, it feels like, oh no, I'm going to drop my bow. But remember, when you're playing your instrument, you don't hold your bow up. The violin holds your bow up. So really all you're doing is guiding that bow. And what you want eventually is this flexibility. You'll never get that flexibility. You'll never get smooth bow changes, and you'll never be able to bounce your bow unless you have flexibility. And you can only have flexibility if from the beginning you learn to play with a bent pinky on your bow. So as a general rule, you want to remember bent thumb and a bent pinky on your bow. Those two joints need to be able to move. Now, I've done a video where I show you how to hold the bow properly in 3 easy steps. I've got it down to a science. So it's not difficult to learn how to hold your bow properly. Just check out my video. I'll put a link in the description. But that's a big one. Bent thumb and bent pinky. Okay, the other thing about your bow arm is that beginners, especially without teachers, make all the time is that they don't allow their elbow to move, right? So when they bow, they don't move their elbow, and then their bow goes crooked. Well, what happens when your bow goes crooked? Well, your sound can be pretty bad because you're not playing in the right spot. So make sure when you bow, you're allowing your arm to bend right here in the elbow. So your arm moves at the elbow and it moves at the shoulder. Shoulder, elbow, right? Those 2 points. Make sure you when you're moving your arm, you're moving that elbow, and then you can play with straight bows. And that's going to give you way better sound and make bowing the violin a lot less frustrating. Okay, so the last thing that I'll mention really quick is when you're learning the violin by yourself without a teacher, you need some kind of guide. So the best way to do this is to use a good beginning book. So follow a book step by step. That way it'll kind of keep you on track and you can check your progress. You don't want to just kind of figure out how to play the violin and then just kind of by ear start messing around figuring out, oh, you know, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or some fiddle tune or whatever. Just use a good book for at least, 6 months or a year at least. So a couple books that I personally recommend would be the Suzuki series. I use them a lot. I didn't necessarily teach Suzuki method. I taught kind of a hybrid Suzuki method, but the Suzuki books are excellent. So you can start off with book 1. It teaches you your open strings and it gives you some little exercises. It's even got some pictures in there. You can even buy some with some CDs that come with them. Of course, I don't know if anybody uses CDs anymore, but but anyway. I highly recommend the Suzuki series because the songs are all incremental. So you learn one song and then it goes on to one that's just a little bit harder. So you can easily just work your way through the books. If you can work yourself up to like, Suzuki book 4, you're pretty accomplished. You can play, if you can get up to Suzuki book 3 or Suzuki book 4, you can play just about any of the little, fiddle tunes or Celtic stuff or rock and roll or country music or whatever you want to play. You could probably play all that stuff. Another book that I would recommend would be the Essential Elements, right? Those are very, very common. You find a lot of public schools using these essential elements. I'm not as familiar with those books, but I know they're super popular, and a lot of the teachers that teach out of Kennedy Violin use those books. And part of the reason is because, they're just like the Suzuki books. They're very incremental. They make learning pretty easy. The notation is very easy to read. They start off very, very simply. So you can have a very rudimentary understanding of music in general, and you'll still be able to use them. But whatever book that you use, right? There's a lot of good books, I'm sure, out there, but you just want to make sure you're using a book because it'll give your practice sessions some good structure. So just to sum things up, the reason why some people say that the chances you'll be successful learning the violin without a teacher are non-existent practically are because there are some things about the violin that are very counterintuitive. But I've pointed those counterintuitive things out today. So if you just follow those 4 easy steps that I gave you, you can avoid learning some things on the violin that are difficult to learn because they're counterintuitive. Just learn those properly in the very beginning, and man, you'll be able to achieve very surprising things, and you'll probably be able to reach your goals. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Just take a moment right now just to hit that button because I'm creating content all the time. Let me know if you want me to create additional content, and of course hit that alert bell so you get a notification when I create a new video. And let me know if you have any questions. Put them down below in the comments section, or DM me or message me, whatever it is. And don't forget, here at Kennedy Violins, we are players and teachers, so you can contact us anytime. We're always happy to help out. Have a nice day, guys.